Rangers. You are listening to the only podcast in Ontario that keeps you in the game.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, let's do this.
This episode of In the Game is coming to you from Western Survivor Beef Jerky. That's right, Western Survivor Beef Jerky. Get your jerky on at www.westernsurvivor.ca. Welcome to another episode of In the Game. Today we have a former Guelph Storm, a former second-round NHL draft pick, and member of the 1997 Canadian World Junior team. Yep, a gold medal winner. Our guest today is none other than Dwayne Hay. Welcome to In the Game, Dwayne. First off, I gotta ask you, do you remember your first memories of playing the game of hockey, and what was it like?
Pretty young, Chris. For me, I'm a February birthday, so I'm early in the year. So obviously, I get the Canadian winter months. At about 10 months, I think I was walking. I think that first winter, I experienced walking around a little bit on the twin blade there, the tube skates, I think, or they were called. And the next winter after that, I was out pushing the chair around with the skates. And the next year after that, as a 3-year-old, I was playing organized hockey with 5, 6, 7-year-olds because there was no other leagues.
Dwayne, when did you realize that you had the skill and ability to play at the next level?
I think for me at a pretty young age. I mean, just going back to what I said previously, starting so young, I was playing against older kids right from the onset, and I think by the time I got to be 5 or 6 and playing for say tight hockey, I'd already been around it for 3 years, year round playing the game. And I think when you play up, I tell my kids I work with now, you accelerate faster, makes you grow up quicker. You got to play against kids that are physically stronger than you and bigger, and with that comes growth at a higher rate. So I think by the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I come to a realization that I was pretty good at the craft, and I loved the game. And it was really the arena to the street to the basement, into bed, and then repeat from there.
Were you a multi-sport kid, or was it strictly hockey for you?
Yeah, we played everything. I think, like, in the yard, on organized teams. It's funny you ask that. I was speaking to my dad about it the other day. This pandemic, lots more family time, and I've recently moved back to London, Ontario, so it's been great for that. But we spoke of how a lot of kids are good on the ice, and they can't throw a ball, they can't catch a ball, they can't kick a soccer ball, they can't climb a tree. And I think the way we grew up is being involved in a lot of different sports. Certainly hockey was year round for most of the way for me. At least involved in some camps and stuff, but in summer I was involved with soccer and baseball, and then outside we'd play anything. You got bored of something, you grabbed another tool and played something else. So it was anything from tennis rackets to baseball gloves to climbing trees to soccer balls and onward.
Is there any one certain memory from your childhood that you can recall that falls back on the game or hockey, whether it's meeting somebody in the game of hockey or any certain childhood memory playing the game that you can remember?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, like early on, you think about those early coaches and stuff, and it was a little bit from the old block back then. I think some of the things you did then you couldn't get away with now, certainly. But at the same time, a lot of those things did me justice. And one of my coaches, Wally Black, he was my first power skating coach, and there was a couple prominent guys in London, Ontario. Wally Black and another guy, Doug Crossman, that played in the NHL. He ran a lot of power skating camps. But my dad put me in the hard one, on the heavy personality that was a lot of yelling and a lot of chasing around the ice, and the expectation was high. And I think early on, between that and how I was raised at home, I had it integrated in me to first work hard or harder than anybody else as a habit. And, Wally Black certainly taught me that. If he knew your capability, if you let off 5%, he was on you to push 10% harder. And it's funny that that's become who you become. Some it makes, other ones it breaks for sure. But for me, it drove me, almost made me mad at times. And in spite of him yelling and whatnot, I'd push harder and then in turn became better.
Dwayne, I had coaches during my junior playing career and my youth playing career that were pretty tough on me. Would you say that things have changed, or that, the drive and the toughness has kind of gone to the wayside now and things have kind of changed in the approach of coaching kids, or I guess mentoring kids these days?
It's definitely changed like that. And myself with my hockey development with kids, they find out real quick that you're going to first learn to work hard, and we're going to learn to do things properly, and we're going to the expectation you're going to set that yourself. So when you set the bar high, that's where the standard is minimal next time, and we push on above. And my slogan is do the work, and if you can't do the work, the whole cliche talent will get beat by hard work all the time. And I think you can develop the skills, to a certain amount and even to a high echelon in a sport, or a skill set. But at the same time, without the work, there's going to be guys out there, the Sidney Crosbys of the world, McDavid's, that do more reps, put in more time, and they're just flat out better anyways, and you can't compete. So, when guys come to see Dwayne Hay, they find out real quick what my bread and butter was. I tell them that I flat out played in the NHL because I was a 25 percentile in the skill department, and I was probably a 0.1 percentile in the work ethic and team commitment and coachable. And if you can become that, then it will take you a lot of places in life. I think, just referring to what you said about kicking the garbage cans and things like that, obviously, that society has changed, and that's no longer really acceptable, because if you were caught on video or told that you were doing that at one time, you might not coach again. But I do a lot of my own training, and it's my business, and I run it how I like to. So if you want to come work hard, then we're going to get a lot done. I have a lot of experience in it. I've learned under great mentors that taught me how to work hard, B, the skill sets, and obviously over time I've created my own craft. If that's for you, great. Come, and there's lots for you, and you'll quickly also find out if it's not, and you want to just do it once upon a time or every once in a while, and you want to give 80% effort, then I'm probably not the guy for you.
It's been proven time and time over again that you just can't teach or coach heart. You have to have it, right, Dwayne? Like, you have to have a love for the game. If you have a love for the game, you will be successful. I mean, you can teach and you can coach and train the athletic side and the weight and strength training, but you simply just can't teach heart. You have to have a love for the game to want to go further and be successful, correct?
Yes, I think like that. This a lot of people get caught up in the flash and dash now, and I don't when I watch hockey players, because I run camps, and then I go see my same clients for those kids playing the game, and I'm like, where are you? And that to me is compete. That is care. That is work ethic. That is will. So when I'm doing my stuff, I try and teach those intangibles first. Everything else we can build off, but without the foundation, we're going to have a tough time.
So let's take a step back to your career, Dwayne. As a minor hockey player, did you know that you were going to jump right into junior, or possibly, get drafted into the OHL and play major junior at a young age? Did you know that you were capable of doing that?
Yeah, I think for me, I always believed in my ability. Certainly in the minor hockey and junior age, I was probably in the 5 percentile of everything, across Canada, North America, junior ranks. Obviously, I played World Juniors and, was an OHL All-Star and stuff. So I was on the higher echelon. But it's funny when you're at those levels, it seems so far away. But then 2 or 3 years down the road, you're in the mix of it, and then all of a sudden you're on top of it. And that's the way it became, for me. I remember going to London night games when I was as a kid and watching the Louis DeBrusques and the guys that are, 5, 6, 7 years ahead of me, and watching those guys. And it just seemed like three worlds away. And even though I was an elite AAA hockey player and probably one of the best in Canada, it just seemed so far. And it was, the dream was like, man, it'd be awesome to be out there and look at those guys shoot the puck and warm up and how they skate and compete and how big they are. And, and then 4 or 5 years later, I'm drafted there and I'm in the mix of that. And it certainly happens fast. As you know, in the sports world, it comes and goes quicker. But I always had a self-belief there that, I had the opportunity, and nor my dad or myself would allow myself really to be denied. It was kind of a goal since, 4 or 5 years old to understand that you could play in the National Hockey League and make a life like that rather than, for say, go work in a factory as a millwright like my dad did. And no shame on that, but, he wanted a better life for me. And we did everything and anything that we needed to do to give ourselves the opportunity and open doors to get there.
Do you remember your OHL draft year? I believe you were playing Junior B in Listowel for the Cyclones. Kind of walk me through that year and what it was like for you.
Yeah, I think I'll talk about the leading up year. I think I went to Listowel. I chose to go play in a small town to really focus in on hockey. I wanted to get far away from London because it was very political growing up. I left, at a young age to go play junior development in, small town Mount Bridges, which I'm an alumni with. And I do a lot of honorary, public visits and community stuff with them now. And they gave me a real start. I chose Listowel because it was a small town. It was a good hockey town. It had a really good reputation of guys coming out of there in the years prior to me. And I thought with the small town, I could really focus in on hockey. It was kind of a subpar junior B year for me, actually. I really probably underachieved. First time in my life, there was some other distractions in the way. Family was going through some personal things as well back home. And, I think that was a little bit trying for me as well. And, but I got drafted in the 4th round. Probably should have been a 1st or 2nd round pick, all said and done. But I didn't earn it, and I certainly didn't deserve it at the time. And, I had a different mindset going into that summer. I trained like crazy. I knew that, I might be on the outside looking in, trying to earn a roster spot in Guelph, which, had a lot of strong players. You had the Todd Bertuzzis and Jeff O'Neills and Dan Kluches and, a lot of guys that went on to prominent NHL careers playing on that roster. And, I made sure that I got refocused and put in the time and work. I knew that, if this door shuts here, there might not be another open one. And that was, a little bit of first sign of maturity growing up and, figuring out where your priorities were and focusing on the task at hand.
So Guelph had O'Neill, Bertuzzi, Cowan, just to name a few. So camp arrives. What's going through your head? Like what emotions did you have on the first day of camp heading into the OHL season?
Yeah, I think it was just make your mark and think about all the time and sacrifice that gone in over the years, the money spent, the times in the rink, the highway miles, the friendships and sacrifices maybe that you gave up a little bit with, a normalcy life. And, I had a lot of open doors that I closed with, going to camp in Guelph and staying more than 48 hours. I gave up all my full rides to probably a dozen U.S. colleges. Not to say that I couldn't have gone that route later if it didn't work out, but that wasn't the way I wanted to go with my career. Anyways, the fast track was the NHL. So I was all in at that point. I remember the first day of camp that I grabbed our first round pick and I was like, let's go. And, we threw hands and I wanted to make my mark of that I'm going to be physical. I'm going to be noticed every time I step on the ice. And I'm going to earn a roster spot and we'll go from there after that.
Okay, so from 1994 to 1997, you put up 146 points in the OHL and scored 71 goals. Do you remember any of those goals at all?
I don't think I have one maybe that stands out for me per se. I think like what stands out for me is that I was raised on consistency and expectation, and I think I carried that through my young hockey career and then onward through my pro career. And I was a guy that was like, I'm going to be a point and game guy. Might sacrifice some individual stats for the betterment of the team, and that's my personality, and I feel how I needed to play and what I needed to bring to the table, and certainly physicality aspect. My boyhood heroes growing up were Cam Neely and Wendell Clark, so I like the guys that were a 200-foot player, do whatever they need for a team, born leaders. Those are guys I looked up to. I wasn't really concerned with being the 50 goal scorer and finishing last in the standings. I was more concerned with, in Guelph, we had really dominant, top 10 in Canada for 3 years teams. And I think a lot of that is, a lot of the guys on the team, were the same kind of mentality as myself. We wanted to win championships. We wanted to put ourselves in a position to be up top of the standings, in the national rankings. And, with that came a lot of individual success, a lot of team success, and guys went on to a lot of prominent careers. I would bet against most teams across Canada in the CHL that for a 3-year period of time, anyone had more guys drafted in the NHL than the Guelph Storm. So pretty cool to be a part of that. I certainly followed some good leadership right from the front offices, the Jim Rooneys and the Mike Kellys that drafted me to, watch the Jeff O'Neills and the guys that, finished off before you really got going. Really cool to be a part of that. So we just kind of tried to carry the torch. And I wouldn't say that I have one moment that stands out for me other than that I played for the national junior team, later on in my career.
In 1995, the NHL Central Scouting had you pegged to be inside the first round. Were you shocked or surprised with that at all?
I think like when you do your interviews, you know that who's kind of, looking at the draft you. And I was drafted by Washington in the second round. They had 2 first-round picks, Miko Lomo and Brad Church. And I'd spoke to them a number of times. I'd also gone there on a trip for about 4 days to be able to see the greater DC area, find out about their practice facilities, their playing arena, meet some of the brass and the people involved in the organization. And, you do that with a few other teams along the way, and you kind of look where they're slated to pick. And if you don't go in those positions, then there's maybe an opportunity that you slide, because I don't think too many guys are drafted by teams they don't talk to a lot. And maybe that's because of the rankings and they figure that they won't last that long or whatever it be. But I had a pretty good idea I was going to Washington. It was just a matter of when. And in all honesty, where I was drafted in the 4th round in the OHL draft, and a year later to go in the 2nd round in the NHL. I wasn't even in on the rankings until like around Christmas time. And all of a sudden, like, because of my stats and the season I was having, I came up and I started to grow like crazy too. So, I went 6 inches or 7 inches in about 14 months. And all of a sudden it was like this guy that, plays with this big heart or whatever now has this big stature. And if you remember that era, you had to have enough skill, but if you weren't 6 foot, it was pretty tough to cut it. And if you could bring both aspects, then you certainly set yourself up for a little bit more success.
So it's the night before the NHL draft. What is going through your head? What are you feeling?
Yeah, a lot of nerves. I think it's a mixture of nerves and excitement for sure. You think of like all the years and the time spent, like we talked about earlier, in the car, on the ice, working at your craft, all the dreams, all the preparation that leads into that, and thinking that it's coming to this point where you're going to hear your name called by a team, which will open a whole set of new doors for you to have an opportunity to, to play in the NHL one day. And obviously that's just the first step, and there's a lot of work to be done after. But I can remember it being one of the happiest moments of my life. And my parents weren't able to afford to go. I certainly didn't have the money, and you'd have to sign a contract to be able to go yet. So I went with my agent, Rolly Thompson, out of Guelph to Edmonton, and we, there's a couple other guys actually that families, were in the same situation, and just to have your name called and go down to the draft table and put on that jersey. But kind of was at the point was the pinnacle of my career and life. I remember they actually had Discman back then, believe it or not, and so there was none of these speakers they have now. But my dad's favorite song always was "My Boy's Gonna Play in the Big Leagues," and I remember it being an emotional time and me taking that CD down there and calling him from the draft table, and he didn't know yet because they only post the first round, and the first round was only live. So he didn't know where I was drafted yet. But when I called, he knew I was. I told him where I was, and I told him that I had something for him and that this was for him. And played that song, and I just remember that being one of those tear-jerking moments that, frankly, just talking about it feels like it takes you back there. So pretty cool.
So main camp comes and you have Bellows, Brube, Bondra, Brown, Burnett, Cote, Gonchar, Housley, Hunter, Oates, Pravanka, Simon, Tenorti, Zednik. That's a pretty damn good roster. Did you know at your age what it was going to take to step in and make that club or make the next jump into the NHL?
Yeah, I think part of the experience was it was super eye opening. You're playing with like young men and boys in junior, and then you go to NHL camp where the age group. Then I mean, a majority of the guys were over 30 years old. It was a rarity for a young guy to crack lineups, and if there was, it was like a first round pick that was 18, and that was a rarity back then. So go in there and these grown men that literally have kids that are 2 or 3 years behind me in age, and you're out there with them, doing back then we had to do I believe a scrimmage, a practice, and an off ice workout per day, and it changed the order depending on which team you're on daily. But I remember going out there and you're just giving her, right? But you don't necessarily at that age spend your energy wisely. And I remember being why are these guys not exhausted like I am? And a funny story, actually, I remember I I was in the bathroom in between sessions, and I wasn't sure if I was going to the gym or back on the ice to practice. But Ally Frady was in a stall, and I could smell cigarette smoke. And I'm like, "Is somebody smoking in here?" And all of a sudden, he comes out of the bathroom stall, and he's huffing and puffing his cigarette, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna puke, and I'm dying today, and you're smoking cigarettes, and you look like you're out for a Sunday drive. So it's just, it was really eye opening as far as not so much that part of it, but just the fact that they understand how to spend their energy. Obviously, they were better conditioned and stronger at that point with more able to go longer, they're longer and smarter than us young guys. And I really realized in our first training camp that there's a lot of work to be done ahead. A lot of lifting of the weights, time spent, in the gym to get bigger, stronger, faster, with more endurance. And that's the biggest thing that I noticed in my first training camp experience, that you got to be a different level of athlete to stay around with that group of guys.
So you get the news and the call that you're going up for your first NHL game. How did you get that news, and what was it like? Do you remember that day when you were told that you were going to be dressing?
Yeah, I remember as a 20-year-old, I went back to a couple more years of major junior, and I finished out that. And my 20-year-old year, it was either NHL or American League in Portland, Maine. And I was the last guy sent down. And I remember being pissed off, really mad that I didn't make the roster. And you thought that I earned it. And there just wasn't roster spots. There's just too many contracts, too many older guys to pay, and not room for a young guy. And I remember being sent down and doing the drive to, from Washington, D.C. to Portland, Maine. It's about 8 hours. And I actually had a car wreck on the way. and wrote off my signing bonus car. Was cut out of the car with the jaws of life. I had temporary paralysis from the shock in my body, I think, more than anything. And things weren't starting out on the right foot going to even the minor league team. My stuff was all over the highway. I had to go to the hospital. I stayed over. When I was fit and right, they sent me to Portland, Maine. I wasn't able to skate for a few days, and then I was able to get back into a regular routine. And I remember about 7 days after I was there, I got the call. And because I was the last guy sent down when I was physically fit enough and they needed a player, they called me. And I remember traveling all day, going into New Jersey and being an absolute nervous wreck. And if you remember at that time, 97, 98, New Jersey started to become a pretty good team and a lot of prominent guys that had great careers. And I remember being an absolute nervous wreck. The rest of it is an absolute blur to me because I think that you're just so stressed out and caught up in the moment between excitement and stress that I don't even really remember anything from the game, but that was kind of the lead up.
Did your mom and dad manage to see your first NHL game?
They did not make that one. They came to a later game, just the way things unfolded with the travel and whatnot. We're not able to do so. I only played 2 games back to back, and then I was in the minors the rest of the year. Brian Tracci was my coach down there. At the end of the year, I was traded for Esa Tikkanen. That was the year that the Caps went to the finals and got swept by Detroit. But I went the other way in the deal, and that took me to Florida. So basically from there, I trained that summer, and next year I cracked roster in Florida. And, at that time I was able to have my parents to the game, and that was when they opened their new facility that they're presently still in. So that was a cool experience to be able to bring them to a new building in Sunrise, Florida, and don their colors and for them to be a part of that.
So you get traded from the Capitals to the Florida Panthers. That was the year the Caps went to the Stanley Cup Finals, wasn't it? That was a pretty good team.
Yeah, they were. I mean, had they not been playing Detroit, they were built for it, right? And I think that was their last hurrah because a lot of those guys were on their last legs as far as their peak of their career. Bringing in Tikkanen, obviously as the playoff performer over the years with the Oilers, he always had more points and played better in the playoffs than he did the regular season. So that was a key acquisition for them at the time, and obviously trade youth the other way. But really good team, and again, maybe that's why I only got the 2 games in that year.
So you're sent to the American Hockey League, and you're fighting to stay in the NHL. It's a mental grind. Where were you at that point mentally, and what were you going through at that point in time?
That's very tough. I speak of it now, and again, just with this pandemic right now, and speaking about having the memories and some of the stories over the years and whatnot, and I never got to be the guy that just your first round pick. We drafted you, we signed you, and we got to play you. I certainly had to earn everything I got. I was a good scorer in junior. I was a point in game guy in the minors. Played in the first line, played 20 plus minutes a night, played in every situation. Would go to the NHL, would play 4, 6, 8 minutes. Never got out of the bottom 6 in any roster, not for a game at all. And so I think that made it tough that, you play mind games against yourself. It's like, I know I have more in me, and who doesn't want an opportunity, at least one or, multiple games to see what you got. And, I'd go prove myself time and time again, be the last guy sent down, the first guy called up. And every time I'd crack an NHL roster or get called up to one, I would get a very limited role. And I think part of that was because, maybe they didn't think that I could do it at the next level. I think the other side was that, back then, your bottom 6 were really physical guys. And, you played penalty kill and you ran around out there and you dumped the puck and you were an energy line, and if you got a goal or contributed offensively, it was an added bonus. And so that was frustrating and very hard because I'd go, to the minor league team and I'd be expected to produce and I'd be in great shape and I'd go up there. And although I train hard off the ice, I mean, there was times where I played 2 minutes a game and you're dressing and playing 2 minutes a game. And then a couple of weeks goes by and yeah, the paychecks are great, but I'm not developing. I'm not playing. I'm 21 years old and I'm sitting on the bench or in the press box or collecting frequent flyer miles, back and forth from the minor league team to the NHL team. And it does take its toll. It was exhausting. I remember one year whether I played or not, I think I was called up from Florida and down 22 times. I got called up a number of times to get called up and sit in the press box and didn't even play and just practiced and bag skated and worked out. And then go back down to Louisville and it'd take me a week or two to kind of get up to steam again, or to New Haven. And it definitely took its toll, probably more mentally than physically. You're a young guy at the time, so you can handle a lot from the physical side. But from the mental side, you start to second guess. There's frustration. You're mad. And then there's certain points where, maybe you don't think you got it. And so you always had to kind of recheck in and reset and hopefully you were able to be strong enough to power through those moments and create another opportunity for yourself.
So, Dwayne, just how important is the mindset and the mental aspect and support for players these days?
Yeah, it's bigger than ever. I mean, there's so many other things aside from the pressures of the game in it now. I mean, you have the social life and the girls, and you have the fame and the money and that stuff that come with it. But now you have social media, and you have to deal with. You have cameras everywhere, watching you make one bad move, and that's the end of you. And I think, they have a coach for everything now. They have a skills coach. They have a nutritionist. They have, hopefully good parents leading them. They have an agent. They have a financial guy. Like, there's every kind of coach you could think of playing a role in these guys' career. And as you know, these guys are getting paid, 80, 90, $100 million at 21, 22 years old now. Set up for life. That money just wasn't around, and you didn't get paid until you were 31 before, when you were unrestricted or you became 31 years old. And or was it 10 years in the league and 31, something along those lines. But nonetheless, they have so much more to think about now. I don't envy that. Certainly envy, maybe some of the cool stuff that comes with the game that, wasn't around when technology wasn't as far as it is now. But, for me, when I played, you just don't want to go play the game. And I even remember by the end of the career, just kind of hating some of the bright lights that came with sport. And it doesn't end at the rink. You take it home. Everywhere you go, there's eyes on you. That frankly, before the game got old, that goal got old for me, and it took some of the fun out of the game, which I think plays into your product on the ice eventually too.
So you've mentioned your father a few times. Obviously, he's a huge influence in your life. Was there anybody else outside of your father who was an influence to you?
Yeah, he definitely in the main. He was the pusher. He was the door opener for opportunity and giving you camps and opportunities to work on your skill set, all the equipment and everything you needed as far as tools, whether we could afford it or not at the time, to be able to chase your dream. And the pedal was definitely down all the time. The expectation was high, but I think it came from a good place of wanting a better life for me, and realized the potential in me, and really was that push all the time to make sure that you stayed hungry and keep your eye on the prize. And I recognize that more and more now that we're 10 years out of the game, which is hard to believe, but 10 years now, and you look back on it, and we're nothing without the opportunities that our parents give us. And I think that father-son bond is different than what a mother can have with the son, because it's sport. Dads tend to be a little bit more involved in it than the moms would be. But definitely thankful for all the opportunities. I wouldn't have had any of the doors open that I had without him near killing himself, trying to give me the opportunity to be able to afford to do those things. And so that's who I got to thank the most. And I think a lot of players now in the present would say, whether they had a dad that played pro themselves, or one that just wanted a better opportunity in life for their son, to go as far as they can, maybe get an education paid for, sought out pro hockey, whatever it be. I think that's a unique bond that can't be replaced. And I think most kids across Canada would say the same thing.
So now, having stepped away from the game, is there anything that you can say that you have picked up during this experience along the way with the game of hockey?
For me, I I think that resiliency is a huge one. There's times where you feel like everything should work out the way you want it to, and in the sport, and it doesn't. And you put in all the work, and you maybe knew that you worked harder or put in more time than the next person, and it's just not in the cards for you. Frustrating sometimes, sure, but I'm grateful for what I had in the game. I think resiliency of the ups and downs of being sent down, disappointed, the highs of being called up. That's just life. I use it every day in my life now. Training athletes, and certainly I had some challenging years when I left pro hockey, which I think a lot of guys did. But without the resiliency, I probably wouldn't even be here. To be honest with you, I really had some mental battles, and needed to sort out some help, and talk to a lot of great people and figure out who you want in your life, and who you don't want in your life. And I'd say resiliency is the biggest thing for me. That really, a lot of things are going to happen in life, and you need to have the skill set and the backbone to be able to bounce back and move on.
So what advice would you give to the next player that's chasing the same dreams down that you had?
I would say, stay focused. Have your priorities in order. How bad do you want it, and what are you willing to give up to get it? I would say make sure that the game's fun. You gotta love what you do. If you don't love what you do, then I think you're just set up to fail. So first, love it, have fun. Okay? You do those things, and you find the right people to surround yourself with. You could open a lot of doors in the game. If you don't have those things and it's not fun, I'll just say towards the end of my career, it felt like a job for the first time in my life, and my play showed. My training probably started to show. It felt like a job, and it wasn't that fun anymore. And I knew it was time to go. So I think that if you have fun doing anything, I think the possibilities are endless. Without A, you can't get B.
So knowing that more players get drafted into the NHL than making a World Junior team, that puts you into a very prestigious group, making that Canadian World Junior team in '97. What was that like for you, knowing that you were in that category at that point in time?
Yeah, World Juniors is the pinnacle of my hockey playing career. Couple reasons. I think one, playing for your country does something different to you than putting on any other jersey. I always said that if I didn't make it in hockey, I would have went in the military. A lot of Canadian pride. Appreciate what they do for us all the time to create the life that we've had the opportunity to have. So with that being said, putting on the red and white, wearing your flag on the front, it's like war on the front lines for me, and it really was. Putting that jersey on comes way before drafted, first NHL goal, first NHL game, probably even Stanley Cup, to be honest with you. And because we had an opportunity not only to wear the jersey but to win gold, I can't replace that. I mean, I have that jersey hanging up, and I wake up every morning. I make sure it's in visual sight. it's a little bit of a reminder to what hard work does and it pays off or can pay off eventually to be. So I see that every time I get out of bed in the morning, and we watch the old games if they're on TV, and every once in a while we talk about breaking out a VHS and watching the old games on the tapes that we have. But certainly that was the pinnacle of my career. Playing for your country is second to none. The guys that you not only played with, you won with. Uh, you pick up like it was yesterday when you see them. It's a bond and relationships that you have for life. I have a tattoo of it. I got a ring. I got my gold medal, my jersey hanging. It's a pretty fun experience.
So local guys, that was Latowski, that was Devereaux and Thornton?
Yeah, Thornton, that's correct. Yeah, that was pretty neat that we had some surrounding area guys make it there, and we stayed pretty tight at the tournament too.
So during your NHL, OHL, and AHL career, were you a superstitious guy, or did you have rituals or routines?
Yeah, I think I was. I wasn't a big, I was a routine guy more than anything. I think for me, I tell my young athletes now I carried a skipping rope around. Would go off somewhere in the rink and do my skipping routine or whatever, and get myself going, my footwork, and get a bit of a sweat there. And as far as preparation for the game in the dressing room, I think I just kind of always got dressed left to right. I still do. Put on a pair of pants or my hockey equipment. It's always left to right. So I tried to do everything and it timed as much as possible. For a routine, but obviously there's some intangibles with travel sometimes in the game that always, can throw a wrench in there every once in a while. It doesn't always work out that way, but I just like to do the same things at the same time. It was kind of as far as it went to me. I wasn't always an overthinker, so the less thinking I did sometimes with stuff was better for me. I tend to have better results when I play the games and just had a simple routine.
So along this road with the game of hockey, do you have any regrets?
I don't. You know what? I would call it a regret. I would call it a wish, maybe, that I was able to, just play longer in the NHL. I look at a lot of guys that maybe had very similar styles to me or careers that played longer. So I think that would be a wish, not a regret. I can't even think of any as far as regrets. I always said to myself when I was ready to walk from the game, I would do it on my own terms and not be pushed out. I remember being 34 and retiring from my last year in Italy, and I didn't have a great season. It was the Olympic year. I was checked out. It was a job. I was homesick for the first time in my life, which is strange when you've been away your whole life. I just was done with it. And, I think for me, one of the proudest moments in my life is just that I was able to stick by it. 4 or 5 years after, because I always maintained shape and because I had NHL pedigree, a lot of the smaller countries over in Europe still called. And it would have been easy to go and, play for your 100 grand a year and, pack up a suitcase for 8 months and go over and play. But I stuck by my guns even, through the tough times, and, stayed home and tried to get on with the secondary part of life. And I'm pretty proud that I was able to stick by that.
So Dwayne, what are you currently up to now?
I have been the last 10 years, in and around hockey development. I dabbled, did all my firefighting training, was hired on actually, and I declined. I didn't love it. And because I played hockey for a career before that and I loved it, I had to find something I loved. And I meandered a little bit after hockey, not taking that job. Traveled a bit, certainly some ups and downs, trying to find my way. But I slowly got back around hockey development, and I met a few people that asked me to coach and come out for ice times. And I didn't have my own kids, so I thought it'd be great to be around and do some give back and maybe fill that void in your life. And word travels. and people sought you out and headhunt you to come out for bigger and better opportunities. And I worked with a lot of great groups over the years. Western Canada, I did a lot of my own privatized stuff and drylands and training aside from it. In the last 5 years, I presently was involved with a company called Spartan Hockey Development out west, and I basically was their face of the programs. Coached multiple teams, did any ice time or camp that we had, any dry land, and I was basically the face of the program. And then I filled some holes, with my own privatized morning skates prior to school or dry land clients or whatever it be. And in the last few months here, I've moved back to London, Ontario, my hometown. 27 years round trip away, and I developed my own brand. So I'm now Dwayne Hay Elite Hockey Academy. Developed my own website in the last few months here, and working on getting on some stuff online now with the pandemic. Being able to still do my craft. I have some kids coming for social distancing one-on-ones, dryland hockey skills right now, and working them hard, teaching them the important areas that you need to open doors for yourself and have an opportunity within the game, and just life skills as well. I feel like the job now for me goes way beyond just hockey. I have great relationships with all these families and all these kids, and we're teaching them life skills as much as we're teaching them about hockey. So I'm really enjoying, and I can honestly say I love the game more than ever. We talk about memories of hockey playing days, but I don't miss playing anymore at all. I do charity, and when I was out west, I would skate with the Flames alumni on a bi-weekly basis, all ex-NHLers. So there was no BS to it. It was always just a good skate, some exercise, and some camaraderie. And other than that, I really just enjoy spending my time with the kids and
So
sharing my
Dwayne,
experiences.
where can people find your site? Where can they locate you on the internet, or where can they contact you if they want to get some info regarding the Dwayne Hay hockey training?
Yeah, so just DwayneHay.com. That'll lead you to my website. It shows all the camps and specific areas of training that I offer between on-ice, off-ice, on-ice hockey skills, team training, small individualized or privatized groups. I'm working on my apparel and stuff like that. It will be up on my website here soon as well, and people can follow me on Dwayne Hay Elite Hockey Academy on Facebook, Instagram, and I also have a personal account on Facebook under Dwayne Hay.
Dwayne, as always, it is a pleasure. It was wonderful having you in the game. Let's stay in touch and connect again.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.